How to Kill a Monster is definitely one of my favorite Goosebumps books of all time. And so basically, it's basically about this monster. You're home alone with a monster without getting into too much detail on the plot. That's pretty much it. You have to survive and kill a monster somehow, as implied from the title. It's a really great Goosebumps book. Highly recommend it. Definitely my top 5 if I haven't already said that before. And so anyway, guys, today we are going to be talking about how to kill a monster, and basically how the grandparents in this story are aliens or some kind of monster. And so anyway, guys, with this video does come spoilers, though, for the story How to Kill a Monster, the 46th Goosebumps book in the original series. But other than that, actually, there are no other spoilers for any other Goosebumps books. And so, with that out of the way, let's continue on to the main topic of this theory. Okay, so in How to Kill a Monster, the main protagonists, Gretchen and Clark, basically are spending a little while in their grandparents' house. And they're just, rummaging around, exploring stuff. And their grandparents, one thing to note, is that they're very eccentric and all of that stuff. Like, one has very poor hearing. And they're just a little crazy. They live in this giant house. So at one point in the story, the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother basically decide to explore this giant, castle-like house. So they explore everywhere. And one thing to note before I continue on with this is that the grandparents are a little eccentric in a way, as I said before. And also they forbid the main protagonist to enter this mysterious room for apparent reason that they do not reveal to the reader until later on in the story. And also, another thing to note is that also in the story, I'm so sorry about that, guys, but basically they get pancakes and they put it inside that forbidden room. And so basically, at one point in the story, while the main protagonist is trying to find her brother, playing hide and seek in this giant house, she opens up that forbidden door, thinking he's possibly cheating. He's in the forbidden room, she can't go in there, so obviously win. And so anyway, she goes in there, and she finds herself face to face with a horrific monster that is eating those pancakes that the main protagonist saw earlier. And so she obviously runs away from the monster, who now is escaped from that little room. My little question, though, for this story, though, real quick, is how come the monster didn't just break open the door? Anyway, so the main protagonist runs away from the monster, gets her brother, and gets the dog, and basically tries to, kill the monster somehow. And also, later on in the story, they do find a note on their refrigerator, revealing that the grandparents knew all along that there was a monster in there. And basically, they were so lonely in the swamp that that's the reason they let Gretchen and Clark basically go over to their house in the first place. And basically, they abandoned the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother inside of the house with the monster. And they're basically going to town to supposedly get help. And so the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother have to figure out a way to kill the monster, so the town can help them out later. And so basically the whole story is now them trying to kill a monster and them failing almost every single time. And so eventually, near the end of the story, as the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother try to escape from the house, the monster comes in, licks the main protagonist's face, ready to eat her. And then it is revealed in a dramatic twist that the monster is actually allergic to humans this whole time. And he was just asking the main protagonist, as he said his final words, if she was a human. So he didn't know she was a human, and then he died because he was allergic to them. And that's pretty much how the story ends. There is a twist in which the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother basically go out of the house, finally free of the monster, but then they read the other side of the note that was on the refrigerator by the main protagonist's grandparents, and basically they said that the monster has family members, and they will probably want revenge if you kill it. And that's pretty much the end of the story. And overall, it's okay. Not my favorite it is my favorite Goosebumps book. I'm so sorry about that. I think I'm just used to saying that because my last video was about be careful what you wish for. Sorry about that. But anyway, so that's pretty much How to Kill a Monster. And so it seems like from the story that it does not leave a single inclination that those grandparents from How to Kill a Monster are actually monsters. But there is actually quite a bit of evidence, and the first and one of the biggest pieces of evidence I have to prove that these grandparents are not exactly from this world is basically the scene with the pancakes. So, as said later on at the very end of the story, the monster is allergic to humans. That means he can't go near humans, it seems like. Maybe he can, but if he ever gets something human-like in his mouth or something like that, he will flat out die. And so, it's kind of strange. These pancakes were made by human hands. Most likely that would mean that human germs are all over the pancakes. And also, probably some human hair, possibly. It is a possibility that there isn't, but there's also a possibility that there is some hair on that pancake that you can't even see and the monster eats it. So there's all the germs that are on a human all over that pancake, and the monster just eats it. I think that is a huge piece of evidence right there that, you know, the monster, or not the monster, the grandparents are not exactly human. Because that's the only explanation for this. The monster is obviously allergic to humans. He dies when he, you know, eats humans and all that stuff. And he's got human germs and stuff all over those pancakes, and he just eats it, and he's perfectly okay with that. So, I would say that is a huge piece of evidence that the grandparents are not exactly human. Another big piece of evidence is also from that whole allergic reaction thing that goes on with the monster. Because when he gets that allergic reaction, he asks the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother if they were human. And that is a little strange, because he's a monster, he can speak English, so he knows the English language, which is a human language in the Goosebumps universe, unless they have, like, you know, voice changers, not voice changers, but, you know, translators, like in Beast from the East or something like that. But basically, he knows the human language and all of that stuff. And he should know that he does know that humans exist. And and he even attacked the grandparents' place. And they're obviously intelligent enough to know that one of their brethren has been killed or kidnapped or something like that. So, I mean, how can they not know that they're human? What is the confusion, and why exactly would the monster not know the difference? And I think the answer is that possibly the main protagonist's grandparents are aliens. I kind of rule out the fact that they're monsters, just because I'm not really sure that would make sense due to them being monsters, because Gretchen, I think, is kind of age to become a monster, in a way, and so I really don't see that happening, that they're monsters. It's a possibility, but I think the strongest possibility is that they're aliens, because I would, you know, it kind of seemed weird that they're monsters, because then the monster wouldn't be allergic to the humans in the first place, because if Gretchen and Clark were monsters because they're related to the grandparents, then he wouldn't have an allergic reaction to them. You could say the same thing with the aliens, but I think the grandparents are kind of somehow possessed or something like that, or someone copied their body and basically replaced them in a way. It could be sort of like the clone situation, but again, they're humans, so I would say the most likely thing is that they're aliens, and they most likely kind of probably ended up like the creeps from Calling All Creeps. Without getting into too much spoilers, I know this kind of confusing part about the whole alien thing, about proving that they're aliens, but the creeps, just in case you don't know, are basically these lizards that can turn into humans. And I personally think that they maybe copied what another person looks like and basically replaced them, because it seems like that, because the creep, one of the creeps in the story, basically had his father's car there. So, the creep's basically main goal is to rule the world and all that stuff, and they're undercover and all that, and then they have the person's car. I know this, and that's pretty high budget. Plus, the main protagonist knew, in the Calling All Creeps, actually knew them for a long period of time. And they made it out in the story Calling All Creeps that there was a limited time limit to what they had to do in the story. So, that would mean that most likely they didn't all of their life pretend to be humans and all that stuff. I personally think that they basically replaced that other person. I think that would be the same case for how to kill a monster. Basically, these creeps landed in the area of the swamp and replaced the main protagonist. Or not the main protagonist, but replaced the grandparents in the swamp. And that would explain, how the main protagonist in the story isn't an alien, and that would explain all of that stuff. So it makes kind of a lot of sense when you think about that. And I think, personally, that would explain the confusion for the monster, why he knows humans exist, but he'd most likely be confused between, creeps and humans and all that stuff. And that's why he possibly tried to eat the creeps and all that stuff. Maybe he sees them as an inferior species, or something like that. Or maybe he knows that they're creeps and he just wants to eat them, and all that. So, that is a huge piece of evidence right there. That would explain the confusion thing and all of that stuff. And also, another huge piece of evidence to prove this statement is also the whole reason the monster's there in the first place. The explanation given by the main protagonist's grandparents in the story is that basically the monster invaded their house and they basically locked him in the room. But that doesn't make any sense, because wouldn't there be any damage in the house? I mean, maybe there is, and I'm just not remembering it clearly, but there isn't a huge piece of damage in the story. So, how come, the monster got in there, it didn't cause any damage, and they locked him in the room? The monster's obviously pretty strong, and so the fact that he didn't just break open the door is kind of strange. And so I would say that they possibly kidnapped the swamp monster. That is probably why the, other people in the swamp are so concerned about the monster. Other than the fact that they're a family member, they kidnapped him, basically. And that may explain also why they do not attack the house, because if these were just two eccentric people, wouldn't they just go inside the house themselves and basically get the monster, instead of them refrain to come out? Maybe they're kind of scared of the creep alien grandparents that are in the house in How to Kill a Monster. It's a bit better possibility than what we see in the book. This would also explain why the grandparents don't really seem to care about the Gretchen and Clark, our main protagonists in the story. I mean, they're their grandparents, they should care, but they leave them alone in a house with a monster. They let them come into a house with a monster, and then only tell them after they're gone that they're going out to try to prevent this whole monster ordeal from happening. And also, I think those are huge pieces of evidence right there, but I think from what I remember, there is one more huge piece of evidence, and I can't really remember what it was. But that is huge, a lot of evidence right there, just sitting right in front of you. The fact that the grandparents are, have to not be human due to that whole allergic reaction thing. The second thing is that the monster is confused about which ones are which, humans and aliens and all that stuff, because he didn't know that the main protagonist in the story was an alien, which is kind of, not alien, but a human, which is kind of strange, again, I say. And I had a bunch of other pieces of evidence, like how there's no damage in the house, so their story doesn't seem that likely, and after all, they're miles away from a town, so they couldn't get repairs, and all that. So I think overall those are some huge, ginormous pieces of evidence. But anyway, guys, tell me what you think in the comment section below. Do you think that the bog monster, or not the monster, but the grandparents in the story in How to Kill a Monster are, good guys or aliens or something like that? Do you think they're humans? Do you think they're aliens? I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but any of that. But anyway, guys, comment down below what you think, and that is the end of my video, and I hope you enjoy.